he was credited, obviously, not only with saving people's lives. Bill Stafford says he wouldn't be here today if it hadn't been for Michael. And we called it No Greater Love based on the Bible verse, no greater love hath anyone than to lay down their life for their friends. And here was someone who was willing to do that.
An excerpt from today's guest, who explores the life and combat actions of Philadelphia's only Medal of Honor recipient of the Vietnam War, Michael Crescenz. Journalist and co-author Kevin Ferris is here, and I'll speak with him right after this break. I'm Robert Child, and this is Point of the Spear. Welcome back. And before we get into the show, remember to click that follow button on the podcast to be notified of our future fantastic guests like the author we're speaking with today. And thank you. Today's guest spent more than 30 years at the Philadelphia Inquirer, the last 10 as a columnist. His freelance work has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, The Hill, The Weekly Standard, and the Christian Science Monitor. His book with co-author John Siegfried is called No Greater Love, the Story of Michael Crescenz, Philadelphia's only Medal of Honor recipient of the Vietnam War. And co-author Kevin Ferris joins us now. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
It's a real honor. This looks like a great book. And as I mentioned offline, I used to live in the Philadelphia area, and I have great interest in this story. But before we get into Michael's actions, set up the battle for us. And what was the objective of storming this fortress in the clouds? And why was there such a, in my view, an intelligence failure to determine the entrenchments that the NVA had on that mountain?
Well, I think as part of just their routine mission in the northwest part of South Vietnam, they're always probing, seeing where the enemy was, things like that. And 3 or 4 days before the action that Michael took, some of the units had started on that mountain and stumbled upon some pretty sizable base camps. So they knew they had something, and there were some actions there that some pretty fierce firefights in those opening days of what turned out to be a 7-day battle. And so the battalion commander, Sam Wetzel, poured some pretty heavy artillery, air power, and even naval power from the USS New Jersey, about 35 miles off the coast, onto the mountain in preparation for sending his troops up there. And his plan was to go up in 3 different directions: a left flank, right flank, and up the center. And so they knew they were going to be facing some pretty sizable North Vietnamese elements. But I think the surprise, and I mean, I don't know if it was an intelligence failure. I'm not sure how they would have known after the pounding that the enemy had taken with the artillery, et cetera, was the bunkers. What they didn't expect, that there were 250 bunkers all over that mountain. And that was a huge surprise. And part of the reason for them being there, which they didn't find out until the battle was over 7 days later and they took the mountain, there was a pretty sizable enemy headquarters there, as well as a hospital. So that was the reason, I think, for why it was so heavily fortified and well guarded. So they weren't completely surprised that the enemy was there. It was, I think it was the bunkers that was the big surprise. And I can, and then on November 20th, when Michael's unit came under fire early that morning, that's what it was from. They were ambushed. They had walked right into a grouping of these bunkers and were ambushed.
Well, introduce us to Michael and his upbringing in Philadelphia. I know he comes from a large family of 6 brothers. Michael,
he was the second of 6, big Irish, Italian, Catholic family. Grew up in a parish neighborhood that everybody went to St. Athanasius Elementary School. A lot of sports. They were out of the house all day long in the local schoolyard or the city rec center, playing sports from dawn till dusk. Had a great group of friends. He was always the tall one, always the strongest one. Very, very athletic. Everybody remembers his huge smile. They particularly remember he was always a leader. He was, but never somebody who bullied or took advantage of people. He just had a very, he was just a strong guy who often defended his brothers and his friends from bullies, and he just didn't tolerate things like that. Um, and he much loved guy. We have several people who he grew up with, who he knew from first grade, talking about their friendship, and they went to the prom together and things like that. So he's still very much missed, and several of them will mention in the book. Their firstborn son was named Michael, his honor. So he, there's big family. Both his mom and dad came from big families, and a lot of cousins, and all the cousins, they just remembered him as the one with the guy with the big smile who made everybody feel great. But in this community, you learned that family was important, community was important, and service to that community was important. So when their term came, his older brother joined the Marines first and did a 13-month tour of duty in Vietnam. And he was still over there when Michael joined the Army, not long after graduating from high school. And then by the time his older brother Charlie came home, Michael was ready to go over there.
Let's see. What year was that he went over there?
68.
68. Oh, same year.
He joined in early 68, did all his training, wound up in Vietnam in September of 68, and was only there 2 months, before the battle.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. Next week, we'll have 2 Christmas week programs. First, we'll speak with John Koopman III, an author and living historian who has portrayed General George Washington in major theatrical films. Then, on Christmas Eve, we'll recreate Christmas 1942 with excerpts from news reports and popular music of the time. I'll also interview Peter Harmson about his book, Darkest Christmas, December 1942, and a World at War.
One of the interesting things about war is that it gives us a much deeper knowledge about what it really means to be human, like brings both the proverbially best and the worst in people. This is even more the case when we are talking about Christmas in wartime.
This is one Christmas special you won't want to miss. And before we return to the conversation, if you're enjoying the story of the Vietnam War, check out our earlier program, Just Another Day in Vietnam, with Special Operations legend Colonel Keith Nightingale.
It was just morning, and you could see it. He was probably less than 200 feet above me, and he had just triggered a pair of 500-pound bombs. And I looked up at that instant and saw the air brakes from the bombs right on top of me, and I'm saying, holy I'm about to die here.
It's show 117 from season 1, and you'll easily find it in our past episodes. Gift giving season is here, and for the military history lover on your list, check out my book about the Black Medal of Honor recipients of World War II. Immortal Valor chronicles these timeless heroes' life journeys through all the pain and struggle until their ultimate triumphs. I hope you purchase the book or audiobook, which is available now in stores and online. Now back to the conversation. How did you come across this story and go about researching it?
I first heard about it. I was a columnist and editor at the Philadelphia Inquirer for a number of years. And I had heard about this family that was getting ready to move their Vietnam War hero brother, Michael, from the local cemetery to Arlington National Cemetery. All of the brothers were, no longer in Philadelphia. The parents were gone. And there was a kind of a consensus among the brothers that he should be somewhere with his fellow heroes. So they organized this effort. It took them a couple of years to get things together. And then they were getting ready to move him. And I went out and covered, they had a ceremony in the original cemetery, kind of a disinterment ceremony. And I went out and covered that and first met the brothers, and then covered another part of the ceremony. They moved him from the cemetery to a local funeral home for a few days till the scheduled burial at Arlington, and then motorcaded down from there. Huge motorcade of, dozens and dozens of vehicles and motorcycles and veterans and state police to take him from Pennsylvania down to Arlington.
That's great.
So that was my initial finding of the story. That was in 2008, and then stayed in touch with the brother over the years, who was working to get a book published, and then approached me a couple of years ago and asked if I would help out with that.
Well, that's great. So it came from the family, essentially.
Yes, and the family. I mean, between the family and local Vietnam veterans, they've done so much to make sure Michael's story has gotten out there, and that his sacrifice and what his whole generation of veterans did is never forgotten, and it's honored when where it wasn't really in their day.
Take us back to that day in November 1968 on Noi Chom Mountain, where Michael stepped forward.
I think it was early morning-ish. They were making their way up the mountain. This is kind of the monsoon season, so it was a very steep mountain. It was muddy, it was rainy, it was wet, and they were kind of going up in some places, on their hands and knees, crawling. Not far into that day, their unit was ambushed. They had walked right into the middle of several North Vietnamese bunkers and were ambushed. Several guys went down right away. Everybody hit the dirt. One of the medics, Bill Stafford, was called forward, and he went forward to take care of the wounded as best he could, and wound up getting trapped up there with one of the wounded guys. And the big mystery, I mean, Michael's battalion commander says it, and the guys around him say it. They don't know why or what possessed Michael to do it, but he was a regular rifleman. He wasn't a machine gunner, but he wound up picking up an M60 machine gun and charging the first bunker, which was about 100 meters away. Managed to take out the bunker, kill the two soldiers in it, turned to a second bunker, took out that bunker, turned to a third bunker, took out that bunker. And around that time, he was up where Doc Stafford was with the wounded guy. And, they had their heads buried down as deep as they could, trying to stay safe from the enemy fire. And there's Michael looming over them. And he just kind of turns to him and says, "Oh, it's okay, Doc, I got this." And right around then, a fourth bunker opened fire on them. So Michael turned to that bunker, charged it, and it was in the course of charging that bunker that he was fatally wounded.
That's an amazing heroic story.
Kind of disrupted what the enemy was doing, gave his guys a chance to regroup and get it together. And then he was credited, obviously, not only with saving people's lives. Bill Stafford says he wouldn't be here today if it hadn't been for Michael. But in the course of regrouping, then they were able to move forward and complete the mission.
What is it you want readers to, if you could distill it down, to take away from this book and this story?
Well, I guess the big thing, learning and reading about Medal of Honor recipients is always how very seemingly ordinary people are capable of extraordinary things. And in this, it's so often they're acting, Medal of Honors are given because people are willing to sacrifice their lives for others. I think most have been awarded posthumously since World War II, the majority. So people are willing to sacrifice themselves to save the people around them. And it's just an important thing to remember that that's what service people are often called to do. And we called it No Greater Love based on the Bible verse, no greater love hath anyone than to lay down their life for their friends. And here was someone who was willing to do that. And you talk to some of the veterans now, and it's, and I think if you talk to Medal of Honor recipients too, they'll often say that they just happen to be recognized for their action, but they saw actions like this all the time. So they really hold their medal in trust for other people. So it's kind of a reminder of what people do for others, and in this case, in the service of their country.
The book is called No Greater Love, The Story of Michael Crescenz, Philadelphia's only Medal of Honor recipient of the Vietnam War. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having us and for honoring Michael.
That's it for this episode. Thanks so much for joining me. Next week, we'll have 2 Christmas week programs. First, we'll speak with John Koopman III, an author and living historian who has portrayed General George Washington in major theatrical films. Then, on Christmas Eve, we'll recreate Christmas 1942 with excerpts from news reports and popular music of the time. I'll also interview Peter Harmson about his book, Darkest Christmas, December 1942, and a World at War.
One of the interesting things about war is that it gives us a much deeper knowledge about what it really means to be human, like brings both the proverbially best and the worst in people. This is even more the case when we are talking about Christmas in wartime.
This is one Christmas special you won't want to miss. And if you like what you hear, leave a review or a rating or click the follow button. And be sure to check out our Point of the Spear YouTube channel with bonus video material plus full military history documentaries. There's tons to explore, and I hope you check it out. I'm Robert Child, and this has been Point of the Spear.
Music licensed from audioblocks.com. Point of the Spear is produced by RSC Media Group.